Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're going to be going back to the early days of Islam, right after the Prophet Muhammad died. It's a really fascinating period. Um, Lots of twists and turns as new leaders came up, and the whole Muslim community was kind of figuring out its shape, its identity.
Yeah, you put it perfectly. I mean, it's a short era, but man, the ripple effects, they last for centuries.
Yeah.
And, for this deep dive, we're going to be using excerpts from a specific historical text.
Hmm.
It gives us kind of a unique perspective, on how these events have been seen and understood over time.
Oh, that sounds cool. So first up, we have Abu Bakr becoming the first caliph. And our source here is painting a picture of some serious controversy around that. We see figures like Talha, who had real doubts about Umar ibn al-Khattab in particular, thought he was way too harsh, even ill-tempered. So does this give us any insight into what the political scene was like back then?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Think about it. A brand new leader needs to step up and boom, right away. Differing opinions all over the place. Who's the best fit?
Right.
And this concern about Umar's personality, his temperament, it reveals a community that's wrestling with what kind of leadership it wants.
Yeah.
Strength or something a little softer.
That's interesting. So how did Abu Bakr deal with this opposition to Umar? It seems like he really wanted him in charge.
Oh, absolutely. He was totally in Umar's corner no matter what. Even when he was told point blank, hey, most people don't want this guy, he stuck to his guns.
Mhm.
Abu Bakr just kept saying that Umar was, quote, the best, end quote, the best choice, as he saw it. Our source even tells this story about a guy in the mosque, right? He sees the document, official document, pointing Umar, and he just blurts out, basically, that Umar had set this whole thing up himself.
Oh, wow. So there were already rumors of Umar kind of pulling strings in the background. No wonder he got criticized later on for his leadership style, especially when you compare him to how things might have gone with Ali.
Yeah, exactly. That's the key point. When folks even talked about the Prophet potentially appointing Ali, accusations of hallucination, they just flew around. It was a way to shut down that whole line of thinking.
Yeah.
But when Abu Bakr picks Umar, crickets. You can feel that tension in the community, right? These clashing ideas about who gets to lead, how that leader should even be chosen.
Yeah, and those questions about legitimacy probably didn't help when Abu Bakr, like, at the end of his life, maybe felt bad about how he treated Fatima, the Prophet's daughter, you know? Plus, there's the whole issue of him being buried in the Prophet's house. Some people thought that disrespected Fatima's heirs and in the whole Muslim community, really.
Absolutely. It's not just about one guy's decisions anymore. It's setting a precedent. Makes you think about the long-term effects, right? These early choices, how they shape people's views on who had the right to be in charge, legitimate authority and all that.
Okay, so Abu Bakr dies and Umar steps up. Sounds like a pretty smooth handover. Our source describes him, though, as really strict. I mean, a pregnant woman miscarried just because of his presence? That's intense.
Intense is right. And this isn't just one story either. Take Saad ibn Abi Waqqas, totally respected figure. Umar literally physically reprimanded him for pushing through a crowd. And his justification, do you not fear the power of Allah on the earth? It's like he saw himself as the enforcer of that power,
Wow. That's a far cry from the Prophet Muhammad's way, wasn't it? I mean, the Prophet was known for being lenient and kind. You'd think some people would have felt like this was a step backward, especially those who preferred, a softer touch.
Right. It brings up those questions about how leadership was evolving in the Muslim community. Was this harshness like a necessary thing in those early years, or was it a departure from what the Prophet had done, something that maybe caused trouble later on?
Okay, so let's dig into Umar's policies. I'm curious how they played out in practice. One thing that really jumps out is that he put the Prophet's companions under house arrest. I mean, that's a drastic move. And our source suggests there wasn't even much evidence to back up this whole preventing sedition thing.
Yeah, super controversial move. It's like on the surface you see a power grab, right? Even if it means restricting those who were close to the Prophet. But you could also argue that, Umar felt this was the only way to keep things stable, prevent power struggles.
Yeah.
Especially when the community was still finding its feet. It forces us to think about that balance, Individual freedom versus the need for order. It's a debate that's still going on even today.
And it wasn't just like limiting their movement either. His economic policies really shook things up too. He just tosses out Abu Bakr's idea of equal allowances. He says, and I'm quoting here, I shall not consider at par one who has fought against the Prophet and one who has fought to his side.
Right. He creates this whole hierarchy based on what people had done in the past. And you can imagine that had a huge impact. Like the guys who fought at the Battle of Badr, they got way more than those who converted later. even if their roles were similar. We even have the amounts they got, the Muhajirun, the Ansar, the Prophet's widows, even Umar's own son. It's a real shift away from the early days, from that egalitarian ideal.
Wow. I can see how that would breed resentment, especially among those who felt like they were getting a raw deal. Our source even says that this led to class divisions, and it even brought up issues of, like, nationalism and tribalism, highlighting the differences between Arabs and non-Arabs. Do you think maybe that Umar, despite his good intentions, actually made things worse? Like, made those social tensions even stronger?
That's the tricky thing about leadership decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they backfire. And speaking of backfiring, our source does mention Umar kind of regretting the wealth some companions were piling up because of these policies.
Yeah.
It's like even he, Mr. Strong Convictions, realized that, his approach wasn't perfect. Had some downsides.
And then there's this whole thing about him excluding the Banu Hashim clan, the Prophet's own family, from government. What's that all about?
Oh, yeah. It's a big deal. Here you have this leader trying to consolidate his power, but he pushes aside the people closest to the Prophet. It suggests a shift in power, away from the Prophet's inner circle towards those who maybe thought they deserved it more,
Oh.
or that they were just better suited to rule.
It's so interesting how, he does all this, and yet he's also super worried about corruption among his governors. He even goes as far as valuing their assets before and after their service, like to catch anyone who might be skimming off the top.
Oh, yeah. And our source gives this great example with Abu Huraira, who was governor of Bahrain.
Mm-hmm.
Umar accuses him of taking money he wasn't supposed to, treats him harshly, punishes him physically, and takes half of his assets. And this wasn't a one-time thing either. Our source mentions him doing the same thing, seizing half the assets to multiple officials.
But then he's lenient towards others. Like Muawiyah, who was accused of embezzlement, Umar actually defends him. He says, "You always talk of Khosrow and Caesar while there is Muawiyah among you." So was he just playing favorites?
It definitely makes it hard to figure out his leadership style. Was he just this ruthless enforcer of rules, or did he play favorites? Or maybe he was just trying to be practical. Sometimes being practical means bending the rules a little.
It's like he wanted control, but he also had to be realistic, and it didn't always work out. So in the middle of all this, there's Imam Ali. It's amazing how different he was from Umar, even though he went through a lot under Umar's rule. His rights ignored, his position neglected, even his inheritance was messed with. But he just stayed out of politics.
That's what's so fascinating about Ali. He had every reason to be angry, to fight back against Umar, but instead he focused on scholarship and spirituality.
And it's crazy how Umar, even though he sidelined Ali, he kept asking for his advice. Remember that story where Umar's asked this legal question, and he's like, "Ask the bald guy next to me," and it's Ali. And then there's that famous line, "Had it not been for Ali, Umar would certainly have perished."
Right. It's a paradox. He sees Ali's wisdom, he knows Ali's an expert, but he keeps him out of leadership. It makes you wonder if Umar knew, deep down, how valuable Ali was, even if he couldn't fully accept him as a leader.
And it wasn't just legal stuff. Ali actually advised Umar against leading some military campaigns himself, like that potential invasion of Rome or the one in Persia. He even weighed in on the idea of selling the ornaments from the Kaaba. Clearly, Umar relied on Ali's strategic thinking, even though they had their differences.
It's a real missed opportunity, isn't it? Not having Ali in a formal leadership role makes you think about how history might have turned out differently if he'd been in charge.
Yeah, no kidding. But let's talk about how Umar's reign ended. It was pretty sudden, right? Assassinated by Abu Lulu'a, a Persian slave. What's the story there?
Well, this is a big turning point, and it's tied to the bigger historical picture. Remember, Umar conquered Persia, and that caused a lot of bad feelings among some Persians. Our source even points out that Umar was openly dismissive of Persians, even put discriminatory policies in place. There's even this story where Abu Lulu'a complains about the heavy taxes, and Umar makes fun of his skills.
Yeah, and there's that other incident too, the one where Umar ridicules Abu Lulu'a for saying he could build a windmill. Seems like all those little insults might have added up, created this anger and resentment.
It's a reminder, right? Being a leader, it's not just about making big speeches or strategic plans. It's about how you treat everyone, especially the people you've conquered. Abu Lulu'a's act, while tragic, shows what can happen when a leader is arrogant and insensitive.
And get this, our source suggests that Umar, as he's dying, actually expresses regret, maybe even about how he treated the Prophet's family. It's like poetic justice, Maybe he finally realized what he had done and what it all meant.
It definitely adds another dimension to his legacy. Was he a tyrant? Was he just pragmatic? Or a flawed guy trying his best? Maybe all the above. It's up to us, really, to wrestle with all that and decide for ourselves.
Okay, before we wrap this up, we have to talk about how Umar set up the system for choosing his successor. The Shura Committee. 6 big names. Ali, Saad ibn Abi Waqqas, al-Zubair ibn al-Awwam, Talha ibn Ubaidullah, Uthman ibn Affan, and Abd al-Rahman ibn Auf. What was he thinking with this?
Well, it might seem like he was trying to be more collaborative, right? Get more people involved in the decision. But as we'll see, how this shura was formed, how it played out, it caused a whole lot of controversy. And ultimately, it laid the groundwork for some serious upheaval in the Muslim community.
Okay, so we're back, and it's time to dig into this shura system that Umar set up. I mean, on the surface, having this council, all these respected figures choosing the next leader, sounds pretty fair, but something tells me it wasn't that simple.
You got that right. Remember those whispers we talked about?
Yeah.
About Umar, like manipulating stuff behind the scenes? Well, they get a lot louder when you look at how this shura actually went down. It's almost like he was trying to get a specific result, even while saying he wanted everyone to have a voice.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Where do we even start with untangling all this?
Well, right from the beginning, there were big problems with who was on this council, and more importantly, who wasn't on it. It lacked, like, basic representation. I mean, obviously, regular folks had zero say, but even among the elites, some big names were left out.
Like who? Give me some names. I need some context here.
Okay, so think about guys like Ammar ibn Yasir, Budar al-Ghafari, and Malik al-Ashtar. Well-respected, all of them, but nope, not included. So right away, you got to wonder, was this really about picking the best leader? Or was it more about keeping power within a certain group?
Yeah, it wasn't just an accident, was it? It seems like Umar was sidelining anyone who might cause trouble or who might support a different candidate.
You got it. And remember those 50 police officers, the ones Umar told to enforce whatever the shura decided, no matter what. Total power move. Plus, there was that crazy 3-day deadline. It's almost like he was afraid that if they had more time, public opinion might change, and it would mess up his plans.
Man, talk about pressure. A huge decision like that, a ticking clock, and armed guards watching your every move, I can't even imagine. But even if we forget about the rules, the actual people in the committee seem kind of shady.
Oh, for sure. You've got Talha, who had beef with Ali and came from Abu Bakr's clan, who were rivals with Ali. Then you have Abd al-Rahman ibn Auf, Uthman's son-in-law, and he was known to dislike Ali. And don't forget Saad ibn Abi Waqqas. He held a grudge because some of his family were killed fighting against the polytheists.
And of course, there's Uthman himself, head of the Umayyad clan. They'd always been at odds with Ali. So basically, Umar stacked the deck against Ali, filled the shura with people who already had it out for him.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, was this whole thing even legit? And to make matters worse, the Ansar, the ones who helped the Prophet in Medina, they were basically just there to watch.
Wait, so they didn't get to choose the next leader? That's messed up. They were so loyal, so important in the early days.
It totally goes against that promise Abu Bakr made about giving them senior government positions. It's like their role was being downplayed as the power shifted.
Yeah.
Umar tried to say that by including al-Hasan ibn Ali and Abdullah ibn Abbas, the Prophet's grandsons, it would bring blessings. But they didn't actually get a vote.
Oh, come on. That's just for show. Like he wanted to look inclusive but didn't want to share any real power. And then, to top it all off, he gives Abu Talha al-Ansari, his head of police, those crazy instructions. Pick 50 guys and make sure the shura's decision is carried out, no matter what it is.
It's like, hello, where's the free choice? Where's the consultation? He even told al-Madad that anyone who went against the majority, even if it was just 2 out of 6, should be executed. I mean, these are the Prophet's companions, and he's threatening them with death for disagreeing.
It's insane. This sounds more like a dictatorship than a community trying to make a decision together. And it creates this weird contradiction. Umar saying that the Prophet favored these 6 guys, guaranteed them paradise, and yet he's also saying they can be killed for not agreeing on a caliph.
It just doesn't make sense. How can putting off a decision be a sin so bad that you deserve to die? Especially when you're supposedly so loved by the Prophet. It's like Umar's using religion to justify his own political games. And remember, he chose those 6 just based on his claim that the Prophet liked them. But the Prophet was known to be fond of lots of his companions.
So his reason for keeping the shura so small doesn't hold up, really. It makes you think maybe he picked those 6 because they were most likely to do what he wanted, not because they were the most pious or wise.
Right. And to make extra sure things went his way, he gave the deciding vote to Abd al-Rahman ibn Auf, Uthman's son-in-law. Like, he was setting Uthman up to win from the very beginning. especially considering Abu Rahman was known for being easily swayed, and his financial dealings were kind of questionable compared to Ali, who was known for his commitment to justice.
So Umar valued loyalty and getting what he wanted over actual merit and principles. But hold on, didn't the Quran specifically say to choose leaders based on knowledge and virtue?
Absolutely. There's a verse that says, "Say, are those who know and those who do not know alike?" Seems like Umar just ignored that little bit of wisdom in this case. And what's interesting is that even Umar himself, when he was dying, kind of admitted that his approach was flawed.
Really? How so?
Well, his son Abdullah told him, "Just appoint someone, Dad. Don't leave the community hanging." But Umar refused. He said he didn't want to be held responsible for the caliphate after he died.
But isn't that exactly what he did? By creating this whole shura system with all its manipulations and power plays?
Yeah, it's totally contradictory. He didn't want to appoint someone directly, but then he went out of his way to control the outcome. He even tried to justify it, saying that if he appointed someone, he'd be copying Abu Bakr, but if he left it open, he'd be copying the Prophet.
But didn't the Prophet actually appoint Ali as his successor at Ghadir Khumm? Umar was right there, even pledged allegiance to Ali.
Exactly. It's hard to believe he just forgot about that.
Yeah.
Makes you think, was he intentionally downplaying it? Maybe even ignoring it completely? All to get what he wanted.
So yeah, his whole following the Prophet's example thing doesn't really hold water. And in a way, it's like it all came back to bite him in the end. The source says he was crying out, woe to Umar if Allah will not forgive him. Maybe he was regretting how he treated the Prophet's family and the choices he made.
Powerful moment, right? Even someone as tough as Umar seemed to be wrestling with what he'd done, especially in those last moments. And even his request to be buried next to the Prophet Abu Bakr, which meant he needed Aisha's permission, that added another layer of controversy.
Right. It's like a repeat of the whole thing with Abu Bakr's burial. Was it really done with respect for Fatima's heirs and the community? But okay, back to the Shura. What happened after Umar died?
Well, those police officers, doing what Umar told them, they rounded up the Shura members right away, forced them to meet and pick a caliph. No time degrees or anything. Straight into decision-making mode. The first meeting was held either in the public treasury, or some accounts say it was in Masrur ibn Makrama's house.
So even within this super exclusive council, people were trying to pull strings. Sounds like everyone was just grabbing for power.
Totally. And as all this was happening, Imam Ali saw the potential for chaos, for the community to split apart. So he told the Shura members, hey, put the community first, not your own ambitions. He even warned them that their actions could lead to fighting and bloodshed. He said some of them might become leaders of the people of misguidance and followers of people of ignorance.
Wow. That's heavy stuff. Did anyone listen to him?
Nope. Sadly, the Shura members were too wrapped up in their own desires, their own power struggles. They just didn't get it. The first two meetings were a total mess. Arguments, no agreement. And as things got more heated, Abu Talha al-Ansari, Umar's muscle, so to speak, he reminded them of the 3-day deadline and kind of hinted that there might be consequences if they didn't hurry up and choose.
So basically they were being threatened. No wonder they couldn't agree. They were probably terrified.
Absolutely. But on the third day, things shifted. Talha, because he disliked Ali so much, gave his vote to Uthman. Al-Zubayr, because of family ties, supported Ali. And Saad, hoping to get his cousin's backing, threw his support behind Abd al-Rahman ibn Auf.
Hold on, so now it's all down to Abd al-Rahman, the guy Umar gave the deciding vote to.
You got it. But even with all that power, Abd al-Rahman wasn't exactly known for being decisive. And the Quraysh, they were pushing him hard to pick Uthman. They were scared of Ali that he'd take away their privileges.
It's like the Quraysh. Even though they accepted Islam late, they still had a lot of influence. Their desire for power, their grudge against Ali, it all played a part in how this ended. So how did Abd al-Rahman make this big decision?
Well, he decided to, ask the people, gather everyone up and hear what they had to say. Ammar ibn Yasir, who was a big supporter of Ali, urged everyone to pledge allegiance to him, said it was important for unity, for justice. Al-Miqdad backed him up, said they all follow Ali if he was chosen.
So there was support for Ali's leadership within the community then?
Definitely. But then Abdullah ibn Abisar, who had opposed the Prophet in Islam in the past, he butts in, starts pressuring Abd al-Rahman to choose Uthman, saying it would keep the Quraysh happy and prevent trouble.
It's crazy that someone who was against Islam had a say in picking its leader. It shows how divided the community already was.
Exactly. Ammar ibn Yasir, he saw right through Abdullah's BS. He called him out asked, "Since when have you been a well-wisher for Muslims?" Then he made this passionate speech, reminded everyone about the good things Islam brought, and asked, "Why are we keeping the caliphate from the Prophet's family?"
It was a good argument. Based on justice, on tradition. Did it work?
Sadly, no. Some guy from the Banu Maksum clan, just because of tribal loyalty, he criticized Ammar, questioned his right to even speak up about what the Quraysh were doing. It's sad. Tribalism, personal agendas, it was all more important than unity and fairness.
So even with Ammar trying his best, it sounds like things were going against Ali.
Yep, and Saad, seeing how tense it was getting, told Abd al-Rahman, "Just make a decision, man, before things blow up." That's when Abd al-Rahman called Ali and Uthman in for this final showdown, you could say. The whole shura came down to this moment.
Okay, this is it. What happened?
Well, Abd al-Rahman, and this was probably planned all along, asks Ali, "Will you agree to follow the Quran, the Prophet's traditions, and the ways of Abu Bakr and Umar?" That's a trick question, designed to put Ali in a tough spot.
It was a trap, right.
Yeah.
If Ali said yes, he'd be betraying his own beliefs, accepting a system he thought was wrong. But if he said no, he'd look like he was disrespecting the previous leaders.
Exactly. Ali, being Ali, responded with, total conviction. He said, "I'll follow the Quran, the Prophet's traditions, and my own judgment."
So he wouldn't just blindly follow what Abu Bakr and Umar did, especially if it went against his understanding of Islam. Brave move, but it cost him the caliphate.
You're right. Abd al-Rahman then turns to Uthman, asks him the same question. And without missing a beat, Uthman says yes to everything.
So he gets the caliphate by saying yes to those conditions. It's like you have Ali, this principled scholar and warrior, not willing to sell out for power, and then you have Uthman, the politician, grabbing that power with both hands.
It really shows you the difference in how they approached leadership. Some historians even think that Abd al-Rahman was just going through the motions, that he'd already picked Uthman, and this whole exchange was just to make it look legit.
So it was all fake.
It's a possible interpretation, for sure, especially considering how it ended. And when Abd al-Rahman pledged allegiance to Uthman, the people who supported Ali were crushed. Ammar ibn Yasir, he lamented, saying, "We lost someone who would have upheld truth and justice." Amistad was sad that Ali was passed over, even though he was clearly the best choice.
That's heartbreaking. All those people who truly believed in Ali, their hopes just dashed because of politics and personal agendas.
It is. And Ali himself, he was remarkably calm. He acknowledged the injustice, said this wasn't the first time they'd conspired against him, and that he would be patient and seek guidance.
What a testament to his faith. So Uthman ibn Affan is now the third caliph. A new chapter begins. But considering how he got there, it's safe to say it'll be a chapter filled with challenges and controversies.
Absolutely. The seeds of unrest were planted, and those early decisions, they had a huge impact on the Muslim community going forward. But that's a story for next time, on the final part of our deep dive.
Wow, we've really been through it the last two parts, huh? Digging into everything that happened after the Prophet Muhammad died, and it's so clear that this period was, well, pretty chaotic. From Abu Bakr's appointment all the way to this shura system that put Uthman in charge, it seems like every decision had some serious consequences.
Yeah, you're right. It was a time of huge change, but also a ton of tension and political maneuvering. So as we wrap up, I think it's good to zoom out a little. Think big picture. What can we actually learn from all this? Stuff that's relevant to us today.
Oh, good question. This all went down centuries ago. What's the takeaway for someone listening right now?
Well, one thing that really strikes me is how easily, ambition, personal ambition, and political strategy can just completely overshadow basic fairness and justice, even in a community built on faith, like the early Muslims. You see people making choices that benefit them, not the whole group.
Yeah, true. We saw that with Tala trying to get Uthman in charge and Abd al-Rahman being influenced by the Quraysh. It's a good reminder that power can be intoxicating, and even good people can be tempted to, to compromise their values when the stakes are so high.
Definitely. And those compromises, they can have huge consequences down the line. Think about the resentment that built up because of Umar's policies, or the instability after Uthman took over. Makes you wonder, what if those early leaders had focused on, unity, inclusiveness, instead of just their own personal gain?
It's kind of a depressing thought, actually. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But hey, it wasn't all bad, right? We saw people stand up for what they believed in, even when it was hard.
You're right. Imam Ali, he's really inspiring. He never wavered in his commitment to justice, always spoke truth to power, even when it put him at risk. He just would not compromise his principles, even if it meant losing out politically.
It's a reminder that real leadership, it's not about grabbing power for yourself. It's about about serving something bigger. Ali really embodies that idea. He's someone we can all learn from, I think.
I agree. His story shows us how important it is to follow your conscience, to have the courage to disagree even when everyone else is on board. He reminds us that, we have to speak out against injustice, hold our leaders accountable.
And I think this deep dive also shows us how important it is to look at history critically. We've seen that there are so many ways to interpret what happened, and it's so important to consider those different perspectives, to question what we think we know. Because the past, it's usually pretty messy and complicated.
Exactly. History isn't like this set-in-stone story. It's a conversation, a process of trying to understand and reinterpret what happened. And the more we listen to those different voices, the more we challenge our own biases, the better we understand the past.
And that deeper understanding helps us make sense of what's happening today, too.
Right.
By looking at the choices made by those who came before us, their good decisions and their bad ones, we can learn a lot about the challenges we face now, maybe even avoid making the same mistakes.
Definitely. This deep dive, it's been like a journey through a really important time in Islamic history, a time of both, like growth and chaos. We've talked about how complicated leadership can be, the dangers of letting ambition run wild, and how powerful it can be to speak up for what's right, even when it's tough.
And to everyone listening, we encourage you to keep exploring. Don't just take our word for it. Dive deeper into this period. See what other historians have to say. Come to your own conclusions.
Because ultimately, by learning about the past, we can really get to know ourselves, our communities, and the world we live in better.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time. Keep those questions coming. Keep learning. Keep exploring.